You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. In terms of the latest news, as I said, all 9 bodies have been recovered and then have gone to the morgue for them to do autopsies on those bodies. They also, NTSB, they also are on the scene as well. They're, of course, investigating. They're also looking at the flight. There's a video that I saw earlier that someone posted of the plane, the helicopter as it was circling, because they were actually delayed from landing, and so that was that was taking place. Reports also indicate the helicopter was going about 185 miles an hour, and apparently the pilot was trying to descend, and based upon those reports, they simply slammed right into the mountains. And folks are so there was you said there was a news conference? Okay, let's go right to it.
The parties to the investigation are the Federal Aviation Administration, Sikorsky, Pratt & Whitney Canada, Island Express, and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. We also established investigative groups. We take our investigators and the parties to the investigations to the investigation, and we establish smaller groups to drill down to get the factual information that we need. The investigative groups we formed are operations and human performance. They will look at the pilot, the organizational structure, the company, how the company is regulated. Air traffic control, which will look at the history of the flight. Airworthiness, which will look at the airframe, instruments, wreckage, seat configuration, and flight controls. Power plants, which will look at the engines. There were 2 Pratt & Whitney Canada PT6 turboshaft engines, and the power plants groups will focus on that. We also have a weather investigator. And speaking of weather, we have a request for the public. We're looking for photos of the weather in the area of the crash. If you have photos that can help us, again, in the area of the crash, if you could send those photos to witness@ntsb.gov. That's witness@ntsb.gov. We're not just focusing on weather here, though. We take a broad look at everything around an investigation, around an accident. We look at man, machine, and the environment, and weather is just a small portion of that. So we would appreciate the public's assistance. If you have that, please send that in, again, to witness@ntsb.gov.
NTSB is having a live news conference as we speak. Please go right to it.
Interviews are ongoing, and we haven't been able to connect. They are working on setting up other interviews for the next several days. At 3 p.m., I held a family briefing by conference call. We do that with every accident investigation. Either we hold a family briefing to update them on the investigation, make sure they're aware of information before we provide it publicly, and go through the process, the NTSB's investigative process, and what they can expect over the next several weeks and months. I'm not going to discuss the family briefing. You're going to ask, if I get questions about who was on the call, what was discussed, I'm not going to answer that out of respect for the families. I am going to provide you some information for some questions that were asked yesterday and the day before and over the past couple hours. With respect to the pilot, I mentioned that on the second-class medical certificate, which was dated July 2019, the pilot had 8,200 hours of flight time. Obviously, that was July, so the pilot has more flight time because it's been some time since then. Out of that, the pilot had 1,250 hours of flight time on the S-76 helicopter. So 1,250 hours on the helicopter, so that's a good amount of experience. He's also been with the company for 10 years. We do know that the day before the accident, he flew from John Wayne Airport to Camarillo, and the weather was clear. It was a different flight path, more direct, and occurred about an hour later than the one on Sunday. I was asked about the descent rate of the helicopter. We know that the helicopter was at 2,300 feet when it lost communications with air traffic control. The descent rate for the helicopter was over 2,000 feet a minute. So we know that this was a high energy impact crash. And the helicopter was in a descending left bank. Now, one thing I want to mention is some of our recommendations. In 10 days, we're going to issue a preliminary report. That is going to contain factual information. It's not going to contain our findings, our analysis. It's not going to contain any safety recommendations or a probable cause, but it's going to provide some factual information, more than we have now, but just the facts. In about 12 to 18 months, we hope to have a final report, which will include findings, recommendations, and a probable cause. In that time, we could issue urgent safety recommendations. So at the end, when we issue a final report, we issue safety recommendations that we hope will be implemented by the recipients. And the goal is to prevent a similar accident from happening again. 2 recommendations that have been issued in the past that the FAA has failed to act on, I want to talk about. I was asked about Terrain Awareness and Warning System, or TAWS, which provides terrain information to the pilot. I was asked whether that was on this helicopter. We have verified it was not. In 2004, the NTSB investigated a crash involving an S-76A in Galveston, Texas, which killed 10 people. We issued a recommendation to the Federal Aviation Administration that stated, require all existing and new U.S.-registered turbine-powered rotorcraft certificated for 6 or more passenger seats to be equipped with a terrain awareness and warning system. They did not implement the recommendation. In 2014, we closed the recommendation as unacceptable. In 2005, we assisted in an investigation involving an S-76C helicopter, which crashed in the Baltic Sea, killing 12 people. We issued a recommendation to the Federal Aviation Administration to require all rotorcraft operating under Parts 91 and 135 to be equipped with a CVR and an FDR. The FAA failed to implement that recommendation, so we closed that unacceptable. And for this accident, it was operating under Part 135 charter. So with that, I want to state this is the last press conference that we're going to have. We are not leaving the scene. Our investigators still have work to do. We, again, will provide a preliminary report in 10 days that will contain factual information. We'll have a final report in 12 to 18 months, and again, we could issue urgent safety recommendations in that time. For investigative updates, please monitor our Twitter feed at NTSB_newsroom, and of course, feel free to contact us if you have additional questions. I'm going to take some questions, and please raise your hand, state your name and your affiliation. Thank you. Correct.
As I understand it, Island Express was certified just as an IFR. Is that correct? Sorry, a VFR. Was that correct? And would that mean that the instrumentation on that aircraft was not maintained up to
to take that?
So, yes, you're correct. They have a Part 135 VFR certificate as to how the instruments were maintained and if they were kept to IFR standards. That's something we'll be looking into in the maintenance records. We haven't got that far yet.
But is the fact that they were classified that way, is that part of the investigation?
Yes, sir.
Jennifer. Dante Greco, TMZ. How far from the top of the hillside was the impact? As in, how much did they miss doing the mountain bike? And also, was Kobe on that same flight on Saturday that they were the same pilot?
I don't have information on the passenger manifest for Saturday, but the crash site was 1,085 feet. There were other hills in the area, but the impact area is at 1,085 feet.
How much did they miss clearing that mountain bike?
How much did they clear missing the mountain by? I mean, do we
Oh, yeah, 20 feet, 30 feet.
maybe 20, 30 feet over here? The question was on the weather information. And the question is specific to information we requested from the public, photos and videos that were sent in to witness at ntsb.gov, and whether we've been able to analyze any of those. We are in the process of looking through all the photos and videos. I will state a big thank you to the public. Every time we ask for information, you send it in, and it's very helpful to our investigation. With that said, we have received video and photos that are not of this helicopter or even in this country. So I will state that takes our investigators time to verify that, and that takes away from the investigative work that they need to do. So while I do appreciate a lot of what we received, and a majority of what we received is fantastic, but in other areas it does waste our investigators' time. Tom.
Tom Costello with NBC News. You mentioned that TOS was not on board this chopper, but did the chopper have some sort of a derivative of TOS, or some poor man's TOS that may have linked GPS into some sort of a terrain avoidance system?
So you're asking if the aircraft had any type of GPS-based terrain avoidance system. Again, as mentioned, we're going to be going through all the equipage that's on the aircraft so that we can understand that. That'll be part of developing the sequence. Right now, that doesn't look to be part of the scenario that we're looking at, but we'll definitely be documenting all of the equipment that's on board, certified or not.
Yesterday we talked about this iPad and the program on the iPad. What sort of information will you be able to glean from this compared to what a traditional black box would give us?
Well, we'll have to see what's on the iPad. I mean, we don't know right now. That's part of any I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. And the question is, what sort of information do we hope to glean from the iPad? There could be a lot of information on the iPad with respect to terrain, weather briefings that the pilot may have gotten, notice to airmen, flight path information. We'll have to look at all of that, but I'm not sure we have any of that yet. So that's something we have to analyze, and we've sent that information back, or the electronics back to our lab.
Jennifer. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News. Do you have a sense if the helicopter came down all in one piece, or is there evidence that it perhaps broke up as it was coming down? And if I may ask a second question while I've got you. It was in a steep dive, basically, steep
Yeah.
descent. Was that recoverable?
The question is, did we locate all the significant components? Yes, so that indicates to us, preliminary information is that the helicopter was in one piece when it impacted the terrain. The second question is, was the helicopter crash survivable?
No.
Was the dive recoverable? I mean, that we're going to have to look at as part of the accident investigation. That requires further analysis.
So if we just follow up on that, you
mentioned the 2,000 feet per minute descent rate. Is that within the normal operating range for that helicopter, or is that considered an out-of-control situation?
Is that a normal descent range for this Sikorsky? I mean, this is a pretty steep descent at high speed, so it wouldn't be a normal landing speed.
Is that beyond the realm of the helicopter to handle? Do flight controls still work? Does the pitch still control that?
That's something we're going to have. Can the helicopter handle this? And that's something we're going to have to evaluate as part of the investigation. Steve.
I'd like to ask you an elementary question. I apologize for being so elementary, but can you talk about how you attempt to determine pilot judgment in your investigations like this?
I mean, how do we determine pilot judgment? That's a difficult part of the investigation, and we look at the facts in the investigation, and that's what we're focused on. We can't make any assumptions about what somebody is thinking. So our investigation is strictly focused on the facts, and then those facts will lead us to an analysis.
And what type of facts are you trying to come up with in this case?
I'll come back to that. Stephanie.
Stephanie from the AP. Clarification on that question. The 20 to 30 feet thing that you mentioned, can you explain that a little bit more? I'm confused what you mean that it's clear or didn't clear. And the drone, you mentioned that the drone flew the end part of the flight. Explain what it showed.
The question is, what did we learn from the drone from the flight path information that we put in the drone today? I mean, we were looking at the flight path, so the angle it took coming in. We didn't fly it low because that would be a problem, and there were people working in that area. So we just wanted to look at part of the flight path, and we want to document the wreckage with it. You had a second question?
Can you explain?
On the 20 to 30 feet that I just mentioned. The question is on the 20 to 30 feet. Somebody just asked where the impact site was. It was 1,085 feet up, and he asked what the height of the hill was, and it was about 20, 30 feet above that.
The helicopter just missed clearing the hill.
I mean, what?
Yes. The question was how much did the helicopter miss the hill? It's important to realize that there's not one hill. It's a ravine with undulating terrain. So the small outcropping that had the main impact in it, the main impact was about 20 to 30 feet from the top of that small hill, but there are actually other higher hills surrounding it, if that makes sense to you. It's in this canyon with small hills within it.
If it cleared this one, it probably would have hit another one anyway.
There's other hills right close by, correct?
Well, I don't know that we can say it probably would have hit another hill either. I mean, that's an assumption, so we can't state that. Hey.
A lot's been made of law enforcement helicopters being grounded on Sunday morning, and I'm just wondering if it's an apples to oranges comparison.
The question is on the grounding of the LA Sheriff's helicopters that morning, and it is an apples to oranges comparison. It's a different helicopter, different operations. They have 4-person helicopter. This is outfitted for more than that. So, we have to look at this specific crash and this specific helicopter. We can't compare that to others.
So not being an aviation expert, is there any way to safely fly this type of helicopter in thick fog?
Is there any way to safely fly this helicopter in thick fog? I mean, I think there's a lot of variabilities there. And so we're focused on what the weather conditions were for this, on Sunday for this flight. And we have a weather expert on staff currently looking at the weather and decision-making for flying in the weather that day.
Sarah Welch, detailing Paul Claudia, I'm not an expert either. How common is it for a pilot to request to fly under these special visual flight rules?
question is how common it is for a pilot to request to fly under special visual flight rules. It's very common. This is not out of the ordinary.
Why would the helicopter go up to 2,000 feet and then go down to 1,700 feet? And also, is there anything that they would have gotten that would have been comparable to a terrain warning, like an audible alarm?
The question is on the terrain warning. It didn't have a terrain warning and awareness system, so no, it did not have that. What was your first question?
Why would the helicopter go up to 2,000 feet and then go down to 1,700 feet?
He was trying to climb it. Go
Right,
ahead.
he was-
He was trying to climb out of the cloud layer at the time. So, yes.
Talking about your recommendations there at the end, is your position that perhaps if those recommendations had been put in place, that this crash would not have happened?
No. The question is if our recommendations were implemented, would this crash not have happened? Well, certainly TAWS could have helped to provide information to the pilot on what terrain the pilot was flying in. But one of those recommendations on the helicopter having a CVR and an FDR, that would have helped us significantly in this investigation and other investigations. And it's something we've recommended several times over a number of years. So.
Do you know at what point TOS would have alerted the pilot? At what point through the data that you have it would have gone off?
You want to answer the
So
TAWS
the question is, at what point would TAWS have alerted the pilot? There's many variables here, and we don't even have a conclusion that TAWS and this scenario are related to each other. So that's a lot of speculation in that question, so that really can't be answered.
Is it too soon to say whether or not the pilot was still in control of the helicopter when it started that abrupt descent?
That it is too soon to state whether the helicopter was still in control, or the pilot was still in control of the helicopter at that point.
Is that consistent with controlled flight? What we're seeing?
Is what consistent?
The climbing, the bank, steep decline, does that sound like controlled flight?
You want to answer that?
Well, the question is, does the bank and descent sound like controlled flight? That would be asking us to draw a conclusion at this point, and until we put together all the information, we can't make that kind of conclusion.
Last question. On past investigations, whether lack of visibility was determined to be a primary cause, absent a declaration from a pilot saying, I can't see, what evidence do you look at after the fact to make that determination?
Well, I mean, we're going to look. What evidence do we look at to help make the determination of whether he should have been flying in this kind of weather? Well, we are going to look at the weather conditions. We're going to talk to air traffic control. We're going to talk to the company, and we're going to look at records. So.
Jennifer, do you know the time that elapsed between like when the descent started and the impact? Like, was it a matter of just a couple of seconds, or
From the descent,
from when the steep descent began?
the time from the descent to impact was probably about a minute. Mm-hmm. That's it. Thank you.
Any indication that anyone?
All right, folks, that was the NTSB live news conference there in Los Angeles describing the state of their investigation into the helicopter crash that killed Lakers legend Kobe Bryant and 8 others. It was interesting, Kelly. We had some questions here, and literally as we were asking those questions, they're answering those questions in that news conference.
I think it's very, very telling how NTSB advised FAA twice now in the past 5 years to update the regulations and equip their helicopters with necessary life-saving measures for such times as this, and they have virtually ignored them at every step of the way. There is no excuse. There is no excuse. I don't want any narratives of anybody blaming the pilot or blaming this or blaming that. The fact of the matter is, some things could have happened beforehand, such as the recommendations of NTSB equipping these helicopters.
Yeah, but typically, though, to be perfectly honest, in most crashes, it's largely pilot error. I mean,
what I'm
once they
saying
go
is
through,
not solely his, like other things could have happened. I'm not saying.
But again, though, we don't. Here's the piece, though. That was a recommendation. The FAA rejected it. Once they go through the investigation, first of all, while we're sitting here talking, go to my iPad, please. Journalist Michael Oddie is actually outside of the Staples Center, live streaming. Of course, folks who are gathered there. So let's just, as we talk, we'll talk over this. Just want to give people a sense of what's happening with these memorials at Staples. I mean, the reality is, people they go through the investigation, they determine exactly what happened,
right?
And what took place, and they'll go through it and look at those flight records and was it pilot error? Did he make a mistake in terms of coming out of that cloud layer, or I mean, all of those things will come into it. I do believe, Malik, that what happens in cases like this, people learn far more about rules and regulations than they even thought about.
Yeah.
Because again, when you hear them say the helicopter, one of the top of the line helicopters did not have a terrain warning on it, you would think, wait a minute, if you're flying around mountains, how in the world you wouldn't have that?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a very good point. This is, now in the NTSB, and I'm glad that they're actually on, this is an example of our government actually at work. This is what the NTSB does. And as we heard, they made a recommendation in 2014 and 2005 that the director there, she said that she believed that it actually could have helped in this particular situation. Now, the way that government works is that you have these agencies, these independent agencies, make recommendations to the larger agencies. So if it's the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission making recommendations to OSHA, or NTSB making recommendations to FAA, sometimes they accept these recommendations and sometimes they don't. You actually raised a very good point, is that in far too many of these instances where we're talking about regulations, you have lobbyists involved. And so lobbyists are the people who are pushing back on some of this. But just overall, I mean, of course, everyone wants an answer and they want the answer right now. I like what you said on, I think you were on Facebook, and you were just saying, hold up. I'm not just going to believe every single story that came out, but I think we, in our fervor, we want to know the answer, so we kind of make up things to fit whatever narrative. But one thing that can't be denied here is that Kobe was beloved. And I've seen people on, the left and people on the right, why aren't we talking about this person? Well, why aren't we talking about that person? The fact is that this is what happens when there's a national tragedy, whether it's Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Prince, we get these type of conversations because people are genuinely affected by it. A lot of people have been affected by it, and what we've seen everyone from Barack Obama to Donald Trump really just wishing the family well. And it is sad, it took everyone by surprise, but these type of things, they shock the conscience of Americans. And so this is, the reason that we're talking about it is because it is a story that we should be talking about.
But Teresa, also I think that what people will glean from this is that when you look at what they're going through, all these people out here who hate government, all the people who talk about, I can't get government out of our lives. Guess what? There's a reason you want federal safety inspectors.
Absolutely.
There's a reason you don't want cuts in food inspectors, transportation inspectors, individuals that regulate airlines and trains and highway transportation as well, because, and I'll be perfectly honest, I believe one of the fundamental problems in this country is that we are a reactionary country.
That's true.
Today is the anniversary of Space Shuttle Challenger exploding.
Oh, wow.
In 1985.
Right.
And they knew there was a problem with the O-rings.
Right.
Folks, we'll just keep flying, no big deal. Then all of a sudden, Space Shuttle blows up. Oh, damn, you do something about those O-rings.
Right.
They knew when I think it was Columbia, when it exploded, the space shuttle. If there was a problem with debris chipping off of the space shuttle. One thought, oh, that debris might puncture one of the wings, and upon re-entry, leads to exploding.
And the bottom line is when we take government out of the responsibility of making sure that they are protecting us and making sure that the right safety measures and procedures and the right laws are being guided to protect us from these freak accidents, we then start to remove government from their responsibility of what we're actually paying for, right? Is to make sure government is hold accountable, but also, like I said, protecting our rights. So I think the most important part here is we gotta, I know technology is really big right now, and I think when we start to look at a lot of algorithms and a lot of the technological components where they feel like man is not important, or to be in some of those jobs where those recommendations actually can happen. So what do I mean by that? I think, when we start to see people lose their jobs and some of these
automation,
and the automations in some of these entities, and they're not putting a critical eye and they're just looking at the data points. That's when we start to really have that divide and that disconnect, and we start to have these accidents because the human interest is no longer there.
Look, the Trump administration, they just announced a rollback a couple of weeks ago on regulating pigs and other animals, and again, I just want people to understand that what I'm not saying that had the FAA put that rule in place, this crash would never happen.
We don't know.
We don't know that. Because, again, it could have been mechanical, could have been pilot error. We have no idea, okay? But what I will say is that when people complain, this always happens in this country. I remember when that bridge collapsed in Minnesota.
Oh, my God, I remember that.
And dozens of folks died. All the people like, oh my God, how did this happen? Easy.
Well, you know how it happened.
Because our infrastructure is crumbling.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. And I've always said that one of the biggest problems in this country is that we are reactionary.
Right.
We wait until somebody dies and then go, oh, wow, someone said we should do something about that. Okay. Now let's do it. So we'll race to do it. When you, I remember the gas explosions that were happening with pipelines, with gas company in California, and then it's like, well, company knew for 10 years this was the case. Pepco filed for bankruptcy as a result of the fires raging in California last year. Then we find out, folks they knew for a number of years these things. I mean, and so. In this country, I mean, like even if I brought in, climate change to it, it's amazing when I hear people who go, oh, no, look, that's just going to cost it's going to cost us too much money. We too often in this country wait for tragedy to strike, then go, we might want to.
We don't care about it until then.
We might want to do something about that.
But it's not even about not caring about it until something happens. It's not caring about it until you are forced to do something about it. It's one of those things where it's like if we don't have to pay for it up front, we're not going to.
Right.
It really is about money. Like you are
everything.
You would rather have, a piggy bank full of money than a country full of people. That's really all it is.
The big three automakers did cost-benefit analysis. Well, do we really need to put all these safety features in? So if X number of people die, it's going to cost us this, but it will cost us this if we had to add these safety features. We would rather just pay these settlements if
even
folks
with the
die.
lettuce going on, with the romaine lettuce and the rollback.
Same thing.
Like everything.
Right. And when people die, then people go, oh my God, government, where were you? Then you go, I didn't realize that there were cutbacks in the FDA and the USDA. Yeah, because guess what? When people are hollering, smaller government, get government out of our lives, too much regulation. these are examples where regulation is important.
We could say the same thing in our schools, especially in public schools.
Literally
So Philly,
every aspect of our
We're
lives.
dealing with asbestos.
Yes.
We're dealing with older buildings built in
Lead,
the 70s.
lead and playgrounds.
Lead.
Yeah, I'm just, it amazes me when people, I watch the people all the time. Don't give me that BS about smaller government.
Right.
Oh, I say, I don't want government in my life. And I say, there's not a single example that somebody can raise to me where government does not have a place in your life. Just can't. I mean, hell, the moment you're born, that birth certificate is a government document.
Yes, it is.
When your ass die, that death certificate is a government document.
Yeah, and if you think about it, and what people don't realize, so that you see guys, cleaning windows in your city or something, they're up on the 15th floor, there are different fall protection standards that these companies have to abide
It's
by.
called regulations.
Yeah, there's different
regulations. All right, folks, what you're seeing, this is Michael Oddie, who is a travel journalist. He is outside of the Staples Center as we speak, and he has been live streaming for the past 20 or so minutes. People who are just simply congregating there with this makeshift memorial for Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi. We are out of time. We've actually gone over time. I want to thank Jason. Just keep it on that, folks, while we're live. So I want to thank Jason, Kelly, Melik, as well as Teresa for being on the show today. We had some other subjects we were supposed to get to, but because of the breaking news with the NTSB, we went to that instead. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, join Reverend Dr. Jackie Hood Martin as she engages others to think like a leader. Are you looking to enhance your leadership or that of your team in 2020? You can join her newest online course and mastermind group, How Successful People Think. She'll be your guide as you learn timeless leadership principles to apply to daily living. The offer expires February 28th. To register, go to www.livetolead.com/Leesburg, www.livetolead.com/Leesburg. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.